Hey y'all, it's Gabby. Welcome back to my channel. If you're coming back, hopefully y'all can stick around. And if you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Gabby. I'm a leftist YouTube commentator and I make videos about basically whatever I feel like at the moment. So they can be on like current topics of the day, reaction videos, etc. I'm currently in the works on editing a reaction video to D'Angelo Wallace's video on BTS's Jimin and how he's a manufactured marketed image. I have a lot of thoughts on that, so that's ending up being a pretty long video and it's a lot to edit, but hopefully I'll be releasing that within the near future. But to kind of like tide you over, I wanted to talk about some discourse that I was seeing on Twitter regarding former Nazis and leftist communities. And I got a lot of thoughts and a lot of confusion regarding all of that discourse, so let's just get into it. I'll just make my stance clear. I do not think that it is imperative or at all necessary for people that are part of marginalized groups, like POC or members of the LGBT plus community, Jewish people, etc. I do not think it is at all their job, or it is at all necessary for them to be de-radicalizing people in the alt-right. I do not think that is at all their job. I mean, if you're already a part of a marginalized community, you're already going to be dealing with a lot of like emotional stress and trauma, and to put even more of that, to like constantly hear that kind of rhetoric from somebody you're trying to change their mind, that's so emotionally taxing. And I would not ask anybody to do that, but like especially wouldn't ask that of marginalized people. That's just not what I at all believe. So just stating that right, like that's weird. I don't expect that of anybody in marginalized communities. And I also don't expect people that are members of marginalized communities to be completely trusting and unhesitant about former Nazis. Like I really just don't. The hesitancy and wariness that you feel around them is completely valid. Like it can be hard to trust some people when they've held not just like drastically different beliefs than what they hold now, but beliefs that were violent and inherently harmful to your existence. Like I don't expect anybody to be completely on board with people that had a complete change in 180 from like wanting to basically, kill you to being supportive of your existence and even wanting to better your material conditions. Like that's a big change for somebody to make, and so that can be kind of harder to see maybe not the sincerity, but it can be hard to kind of see how real that is going to be and how long that's going to last. And that's fine. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with, not going out of your way to de-radicalize people. I don't think you should go out and try to be their best friend. I don't think that you need to be like doing all that you can, especially if you're a marginalized person, to like be an emotional support for this person, right? Like that's kind of a lot to ask of an individual, and I don't think that's any one individual's job. I agree with some people's opinion that it really should be, white allies' job, or people that are like white cis, to work to de-radicalize people. And already there are, streamers and YouTubers that are trying to do that. And, good on them. And there have already been people that have seen that content and had that open their eyes to moving away from the alt-right. And so obviously it's working, and obviously there are definitely people that are willing to do that, and they don't have to be, POC or part of the LGBT plus community or Jewish. So that's great. I'm not saying that any onus should be placed on, marginalized people, like as individuals, to do anything. However, when you're now projecting that discomfort and hesitancy that you feel, that is very much so understandable and even justifiable, onto now leftist communities as a whole, because you don't want in any way to be potentially made unsafe, I think we're running into a little bit of a problem here, because I do not think it is at all healthy to say that if you were a former Nazi, you don't deserve a community, and there will not be a community here for you in the leftist sphere, when that should be the sphere out of any of them to not only give you a community, but to give you a community that's not based on like a violent and inherently discriminatory ideology. So at that point, when you say like, oh, it's so great that you change your mind and stuff, but I don't really think that you should, expect people to like be trusting of you. I don't think that people should like want to interact with you, and I don't think that you should really be involved in the community or participating in discourse. Like that's kind of like at that point, like what do you want? You only want them to be in isolation. That's all that you want, because you don't want them to be a part of a community, because that's what the implication is, that they have already made their bed in being a former Nazi, and that's all they're ever going to be, and they can never go away from that. And I don't really think that's a healthy mentality to have, because there are definitely a lot of people that, one, you could maybe potentially learn something from, just in terms of rhetoric, in terms of like further de-radicalizing people, because I think at the end of the day we should de-radicalize people in some way. Like again, if you're part of a marginalized community, I don't think that should be your job, but I also think in general it's helpful to hear people, right? But two, as leftists, I would think restorative justice would not just extend to people that were, criminals in the justice system, right? Like, if you are okay with rehabilitating people that are violent criminals, which I think that you should, just FYI, then we should also try to rehabilitate people that also held violent ideologies. I don't understand how you can extend restorative justice and even empathy and compassion to people that you also acknowledge can be products of their community and products of their environment, and thus can make them more likely to be criminals and to get involved in criminal behavior. But you can't extend that same logic and that same understanding to people that held a Nazi ideology. I understand in a way, like emotionally, why people don't do that, right? Because if you're part of a marginalized community, it's like kind of hard when you're obviously, you're most likely not going to be holding that kind of ideology at all. And second of all, like it's just confusing that people would ever support something like that, like support the eradication of your existence, right? So I can understand being unsympathetic and also just completely unwilling to engage with people like that, because like how could they have been a Nazi? Like it's obvious, like don't be a Nazi. Like that's not like a phase, that's not something that everybody goes through, and so it's just so weird that you would think that this is a completely normal thing to do, and that somehow like everyone's going to be totally fine with you coming into the leftist community. Like I understand these feelings, I understand these responses, but what I don't understand is when you project the hostility onto all of the leftist community and say like honestly, like just because you held these views, like you don't deserve any kind of support at all. And just because you could potentially make people of color uncomfortable. And it's just, I don't know really what you want out of leftism then. Do you want people to be de-radicalized? Because if you want to make a movement for the left, there has to be a way for people to be integrated back into community, back into society. And you can't do that alone. You can't just do that on your own. I don't understand how you can apply this logic to criminals and be like, hey, like even if they may have been like violent, even if they may have done something that's like reprehensible, like because they're partially products of their community, and I do believe that human beings can change if their material conditions change, and thus they get more support, then I don't think they can reoffend, and I don't think this completely will make a permanent stain on their character and who they are as a person, right? Like, I think that is fundamentally true, and I do think that we should be applying that to former white supremacists. Again, I don't think you as an individual need to go out of your way to do all of this, but I don't think that we as a community should be going out of our way to excise these people once you find out that they're a Nazi out of your community. It's one thing to be a little bit hesitant when they are still maybe using slurs and they're not being that understanding of criticism that they're getting and all of that. I understand that. But when you're just making a generalized statement about all people that are former Nazis and you're being so unwilling to understand how people can fall down that pipeline, it makes me think that you just don't want to understand people that are different from you. And that's kind of confusing, because the whole point of the left is not just about, helping the already marginalized, right? And comforting them in their ranks and they're making their material conditions better because they're already oppressed. It's not just about that. It's about helping everybody, right? Like, obviously a little bit more of a priority is people that are like the most oppressed. But the whole point of making a community is not just that small group of people, or I mean not small, but like one group of people can be made comfortable. Like, we should all work to be better for all of us, right? And I don't really think making a hostile environment online, which is, by the way, going to be one of the easiest ways to get involved in leftism and to be a part of a community, is going to be helpful in ever giving support from people. Because if you're being like really hostile to people that are just having a different opinion, or even just expressing like, hey, I used to have a really bad ideology, but I don't anymore, and I'm glad that I don't. I'm glad that I'm out. When you're expressing such derision and disdain for these people, like, what do you expect to happen? Granted, I don't think it's justified that they, get re-radicalized, right? I don't think that's the case. I think once you learn that it's bad, I don't really think that just because a leftist is mean to you, it's okay for you to go back into being a white supremacist. But at the same time, I don't understand being so outrightly hostile when people are trying to do the work, and people want to do the work. They want to be better. They want to be supportive of you. And yet here you are being very distrustful and very hateful of these people that are not alt-right anymore. It's kind of odd to me, because I guess maybe it comes off this way, or maybe this is the thinking that, like, once you're a Nazi, you're always a Nazi. And maybe that's true for like an adult, maybe. But when you're somebody that was radicalized when you're like 15 or something, I mean, I don't know. I used to watch Shane Dawson when I was that age and younger, and I don't anymore. And I definitely know that he's wrong now. Like, you can definitely change your beliefs, even when you may have been vehemently involved in it, whether it be through grooming or not. And I don't think that just applying it to people that are already more in your center of political ideology is at all fair. And I don't really think that makes it any easier for people that are working class but maybe just have different upbringing than you to be brought left. And again, like, I don't really think that we should go out of our way to like focus more time on de-radicalizing people than giving material support to people that are marginalized. I don't really think that should be like a main priority, but I don't think that we should just disregard this work entirely, because at the end of the day, we need numbers. We do need more people. It's not just about getting, marginalized people within the left. It's also about getting people that are not into the left, and that even includes getting people that were former Nazis. So I am just kind of confused by, I understand it, but it's just, I just don't really understand what the point is in being so outrightly hostile about a group of people that is just so varied. And it's one thing if you're having problems with an individual, but when you're making a blanket statement that's pretty black and white thinking about a group of people, something that on the left I would think would be frowned upon, because nuance is a pretty important thing to have on the left. It's just kind of an odd thing to end with at the end of this kind of discussion. So yeah, like, at the end of the day, TLDR, we shouldn't necessarily be like welcoming people to the point like, oh yeah, like, you're a Nazi, whatever, you're fine, like, you can do whatever you want because you said you're a leftist. I don't think that. I think we should be critical of the people that enter our community, and I think we should obviously always be holding people accountable. And we shouldn't be just so worried about like people re-radicalizing that we give people that were former Nazis a free pass. I don't believe that. But at the same time, I don't think we should be so distrustful and so skeptical to the point that if someone were to say they were a former Nazi and that, they're a leftist now, that you automatically distrust everything that they say. And now, like, you don't even trust that they're a leftist. You think that they're lying. You think that they're trying to get into the left for some ulterior motives. And it's just, look, I don't understand. Like, I don't really get the jump to making somebody out to be a grifter when one, you need to have proof that they have reason to do so, and two, what does that have to do with you? Like, you're jumping to this conclusion when they probably haven't even said anything to that kind of a contrary, and you projecting a lot of like nefarious intent onto people like just isn't really helpful to getting anybody to have a change in opinion. Because if it's going to be met with so much like distrust, because apparently only people can think bad things and they can't be good things, otherwise they're a grifter, it's just weird to me. Like, I don't really understand the logic of people entering the left and being made out to be a leftist when they were former alt-right or like former like, you know, conservatives, and somehow like, yes, I'm finally in the left, so now I can say the N-word now, but with clout, even though that's like not what would happen, because people are really critical of people using slurs as an example. So I'm just like, I don't know what you think is to be gained from being a part of the left, when you have to be a lot more careful about what you're saying and what you're doing and how you're conducting yourself when you're in the left than you would be on the right. There's like much less of an incentive to leave the right if this community is going to be like that, especially if it's going to be as hostile as I've been seeing on my timeline. So all in all, I don't really think that people should be taking things so personally. Like a general platitude of, you know, I don't think that we should be completely hostile to people trying to be better, as saying like you personally have to go out of your way to make a welcoming parade for these former Nazis. Like, nobody's saying that. That's not an equivocation you can make. It's just saying like maybe being so vitriolic and outwardly hostile to people that are trying to be better maybe isn't the best look optically, and maybe isn't the way that we can grow our movement. Like, if we can be understanding and willing to acknowledge that our environment shapes who we are, and it is a big part of the decisions that we make, though of course that doesn't absolve you of your actions, but we can acknowledge that obviously the environment does play a role in who we are as people, and we can thus extrapolate that to why like certain communities would be more prone to thinking a certain way because of that kind of socialization. Like, we have to be willing to apply that unilaterally, because that kind of sociological and psychological concept doesn't stop applying just because the ideology is different, right? That's not how your brain is going to work. Like, that understanding of sociology and how people work in an environment, and like autonomy versus socialization, like that's not going to change just because, oh, well, now you're talking about like a racist ideology. Well, that's different. It's like, well, that's not accessing necessarily a different part of your brain. You have no science to support that. So yeah, those are my thoughts. It's not really the most like ordered, linear video, but I hope that made sense, and I hope I got my point across. But yeah, I hope you're having a good day, and I hope all is well. Like, honestly, I agree we should be, careful about things we say and make a community safe for people, but I also do think we should allow people to grow and to hopefully be better. And yeah, so that's all I got to say on that. Feel free to comment on it, and feel free to give me some critiques too. Like, I'm totally willing to have a discussion about this. But yeah, peace.